The Bardo Thödol is not a prayer book. It is a navigation system for the most disorienting journey a conscious being can take. Right now, you already sense that death is not what they told you. That feeling, that quiet, persistent knowing underneath everything, is not anxiety. It is memory. Modern neuroscience is catching up to instructions written 1200 years ago. And what's coming in this video will confirm exactly what part of you already knows. There is a pattern running underneath every death tradition civilization has ever produced. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The Egyptians encoded it in the Book of the Dead. The Greeks whispered it inside the Eleusinian mysteries. The Christians buried it in resurrection theology. And the Tibetan masters, they refused to bury it at all. They wrote it down in precise, sequential detail, and they read it aloud over the dying. That text is the Bardo Thodol. And it is not a religious document. It is a consciousness navigation manual disguised as one. Padmasambhava composed it in the 8th century, a master so precise in his understanding of mind that he knew the instructions could not be trusted to any single era. So he concealed it. He hid it as a terma, a treasure text, encoded in the landscape of Tibet itself, waiting for the right moment in human history to be recovered. In the 14th century, a master named Karma Lingpa revealed it. The full sequence, the complete map of what consciousness encounters after the body stops, stage by stage, state by state. Now here is what should stop you cold. In the 20th century, researchers studying near-death experiences, Raymond Moody, Kenneth Ring, Pim van Lommel, began documenting accounts from people who clinically died and came back. They had no access to Tibetan scripture. Most of them had never heard of the Bardo Thodol. And yet what they described matched the ancient text with a precision that cannot be explained by coincidence. The same light, the same dissolution, the same encounter with one's own awareness, stripped of everything familiar. That convergence is not poetry, it is data. Stay with me through this entire video, because the decode of the clear light, the specific mechanism at the moment of death, that the Bardo Thodol names as your single greatest opportunity, that is coming. And when it lands, it is going to reframe everything you think you know about what you are. The Bardo Thodol does not describe death as an ending. It describes it as a structured journey through distinct states of consciousness, each with its own terrain, its own duration, and its own set of challenges. The Tibetan word for body is lu, and lu means, quite literally, what is left behind. The body is the husk, what you are, the awareness that reads these words right now, the presence behind the eyes, that does not get left behind. That is the traveler. The text maps 3 primary bardos, 3 phases. The first is the Chikai Bardo, the bardo of the moment of death itself. The second is the Chonyad Bardo, the bardo of the experiencing of reality, where consciousness encounters visions arising from its own deepest nature. The third is the Sidpa Bardo, the bardo of rebirth, where the momentum of unresolved mental patterns begins to draw awareness toward a new incarnation. 3 phases, 3 distinct territories. And for each one, the Bardo Thodol provides specific instructions. Not metaphors, instructions. This is the piece that most people miss entirely. The text was not written to be read quietly in monasteries by monks in contemplation. It was written to be read aloud, to the dying person, in real time, as they were transitioning. Tibetan masters would sit with the body, sometimes for 3 days after clinical death, and recite the instructions directly into the ear of the deceased, because the tradition held that consciousness remains present and receptive long after the body has gone still. They were not performing a ritual for the comfort of the living. They were guiding a traveler through unfamiliar terrain using a map that had been tested for over 1,000 years. Karma Lingpa's 14th century revelation preserved the full sequence intact, and what he gave the world was not a philosophical framework. It was a practical manual. It named the specific lights that would appear. It described the specific sounds. It identified the precise moments when awareness would be offered an opportunity to recognize its own nature, and the precise moments when fear or confusion would cause it to contract and miss that opportunity. Every stage accounted for, every pitfall named. So here is the question the rational mind wants to ask. How could anyone know this? How could any tradition produce a document this specific about territory that, by definition, no living person can have mapped? And the answer the Bardo Thodol itself provides is this. The masters did not theorize about death. They practiced dying while alive, through deep meditation, specifically through the practices of Dzogchen and the 6 yogas of Naropa, advanced practitioners learn to navigate the same states of consciousness that arise at death. The dissolution of the senses, the collapse of ordinary mind, the encounter with what the text calls the clear light of the Dharmata. They mapped it from the inside, in states of living awareness, and they encoded that map in a language precise enough to be read aloud over a corpse 1200 years later and still be accurate. Carl Jung understood this. When the first Western translation appeared in 1927, brought to the English-speaking world by the scholar W.Y. Evans Wentz, Jung wrote a psychological commentary that recognized immediately what he was looking at. He called it a guide for the dying that was simultaneously a guide for the living. Because the states it described, the dissolution of the ego, the encounter with raw awareness, the arising of projections from the unconscious, these are not unique to physical death. They arise in deep meditation. They arise in psychedelic states. They arise in the darkest passages of grief and psychological transformation. The Bardo Thödol is a map of consciousness itself, with death as its most extreme and revealing laboratory. The decode move is this. The 3 Bardos are not exotic theology. They are a phenomenological description of what awareness does when it is stripped of its familiar scaffolding. When the body goes, the senses go. When the senses go, the ordinary thinking mind goes. And what remains, what the text insists remains, what NDE researchers are now documenting in peer-reviewed journals, is awareness itself. Naked, luminous, and completely disoriented, because nothing in modern culture prepared it for this moment. That is why the manual exists. Not to comfort the grieving, not to perform religious ceremony. To give the traveler a map before the journey begins, so that when the terrain appears, something in consciousness recognizes it. Something says, I have been told about this. I know where I am. And that brings us to the single most important moment in the entire sequence. The moment the Bardo Thödol treats as the supreme opportunity, the one that appears first, lasts only an instant, and carries more consequence than anything that follows. The clear light. The text does not describe it as a vision or a symbol or a metaphor for peace. It describes it as the fundamental nature of mind itself, appearing naked and undisguised at the moment the body releases. A recognition opportunity, and almost no one takes it. But here is what they don't tell you, and this is the piece that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to find language for. The reason almost no one recognizes the clear light at death has nothing to do with spiritual failure. It has everything to do with a specific architecture of mental habit that was being built, layer by layer, across an entire lifetime. And that architecture has a name, and it can be understood. And understanding it changes everything about how you live right now. Here is the layer that modern science has been quietly, reluctantly, building toward for decades. Consciousness does not require a living brain. That is not a mystical claim. That is a documented finding from peer-reviewed cardiac research. And once you understand what that means for the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the whole conversation changes. Pim van Lommel is a Dutch cardiologist. He spent years studying patients who were clinically dead, heart stopped, brain activity flatlined, and then resuscitated. His landmark study, published in The Lancet in 2001, followed 344 cardiac arrest survivors. What he found shattered the materialist model of consciousness. 18% of those patients reported clear, structured, verifiable experiences during the period when their brains showed zero measurable activity. Not vague impressions, not drug-induced hallucinations. Structured, sequential experiences that matched a pattern. And here is the pattern they reported. A tunnel, a light. A life review, every significant moment of their existence playing out in vivid, non-linear detail. Encounters with presences. A boundary, a choice, or a force that returned them. Sound familiar? It should. Because that sequence is not random. That sequence is the Bardo Thodol, stage by stage. In patients who had never read a Tibetan text, in patients from every cultural background, in patients who were atheists, the phenomenology matched. The map worked. The map worked on people who didn't even know the map existed. What does that tell you? It tells you the map isn't describing a religious belief. It's describing a structure that is apparently built into consciousness itself. The Tibetan masters weren't inventing mythology. They were documenting a territory that every human being passes through, and some, in the moment of clinical death, briefly enter and return from. Van Lommel's conclusion was radical by academic standards. He proposed that consciousness is non-local, that it is not produced by the brain but received by it, the way a television receives a signal without being the source of the broadcast. The brain, in this model, is a tuner, and death is not the destruction of the signal. Death is the tuner going offline. The signal continues. Now, is that the Tibetan understanding? Almost exactly. The Bardo Thödol describes consciousness as something that temporarily inhabits a body, not something the body generates. The text is explicit about this. The awareness that travels through the Bardo states is not a product of biology. It is the ground of experience itself, wearing biology temporarily, the way you wear a coat. And here is where resuscitation medicine has taken this seriously, in ways that would have seemed impossible 30 years ago. Researchers in the field now treat near-death experience reports as what they call phenomenological data, meaning these are real experiences, happening in a real sequence, to real people, and the sequence is consistent enough to constitute evidence of something. Not proof of the Tibetan afterlife cosmology specifically, but evidence that dying has structure, that it is not a wall, that it is a passage with stages. Verified out-of-body perception is the detail that stops the skeptics cold. In Van Lommel's study, and in subsequent research by Sam Parnia at New York University, some resuscitated patients described watching their own resuscitation from above the operating table. They described specific details, the position of medical staff, conversations that took place, instruments used, details they could not have perceived from a body that was flatlined, details that were later confirmed by the medical teams present. That is not wishful thinking. That is data. The Bardo Thodol describes the newly dead consciousness as observing its own body from above, confused, trying to communicate with the living who cannot perceive it. The text even describes the experience of passing through walls, of moving without physical resistance. Patients in Van Lommel's study described the same thing, unprompted, in their own words, using different language, but mapping the same territory. Here is the decode move. The ancient Tibetan masters didn't have cardiac monitors. They didn't have EEG machines. They had something else. They had a contemplative tradition, thousands of years deep, built on the direct investigation of consciousness by trained minds. They sent their most advanced practitioners into states of consciousness that border on death, through meditation, through breathwork, through systematic inner exploration, and they documented what those practitioners reported. Then they cross-referenced those reports across generations. What emerged was a map, and that map, it turns out, matches what modern medicine is now documenting in resuscitation wards across the Western world. The text isn't metaphor, it isn't poetry, it's cartography. It's a map of a territory that is real, that is structured, and that every human being is eventually going to navigate. But here's what science still hasn't cracked. The map tells you where you're going. What it doesn't explain yet, what the research hasn't touched, is why your experience of that territory looks the way it does, why some people report bliss and others report confusion, why the luminosity is recognized by some and missed by others. That answer lives in a layer beneath the neuroscience. It lives in the architecture of who you were before you died. This is the layer that most people skip because it sounds like a moral system. It isn't. Karma is not punishment. Let me say that again, because the word has been so thoroughly misunderstood in the West. Karma is not cosmic justice. Karma is momentum. It is the accumulated direction of your trained attention. And at the moment of death, that momentum is everything. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is precise about this. The quality of your death experience, which Bardo visions arise, whether you recognize the clear light or flee from it, which realm of rebirth your consciousness is drawn toward, all of it is determined by the mental habits you built across your lifetime. Not your beliefs, not your affiliations, your habits. The grooves worn deep into your awareness by 10,000 repetitions of how you responded to fear, to desire, to anger, to love. So what is karma, really? It is the architecture of your attention. Every time you met a difficult moment with patience, you deepened a groove. Every time you reacted from unconscious fear, you deepened a different groove. At death, when the ego structure dissolves and the mind is left naked, those grooves are all that remain. They become the lens through which the Bardo visions are perceived. They become the current that carries you toward your next experience. The 6 realms of rebirth in Tibetan cosmology are not geography. This is the decode move that changes everything. The 6 realms, the God realm, the jealous God realm, the human realm, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, the hell realm, are not physical locations you travel to. They are psychological states. They are descriptions of the quality of consciousness that arises when specific mental patterns dominate. The hell realm is not fire and torment as an external punishment. It is the subjective experience of a consciousness dominated by rage, locked in its own burning. The hungry ghost realm is not literal starvation. It is the experience of insatiable craving, of a consciousness so consumed by wanting that satisfaction is structurally impossible. You have met people living in those realms, right now, in human bodies, walking around. The tradition of meditative training exists precisely because of this understanding. If the death experience is shaped by mental habit, then training the mind in life is not a spiritual luxury. It is preparation. It is the most practical thing a human being can do. Tibetan practitioners spent years, sometimes decades, rehearsing the recognition of the clear light, rehearsing the dissolution of the ego, rehearsing the encounter with the wrathful and peaceful deities in controlled meditative states, so that when those same visions arose at death, they would not be overwhelmed, they would recognize. And recognition is liberation. Now, is this a uniquely Tibetan idea? No. And this is where the civilizational parallel lands with force. Ancient Egypt encoded the same law in its central funerary ritual, the weighing of the heart. In the Hall of Two Truths, the deceased's heart, understood as the seat of conscience and accumulated deed, was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the feather of cosmic order, of truth, of right action. A heart heavy with unresolved patterns, with habitual cruelty or self-deception, sank. A heart light with genuine alignment rose. Osiris presided, Thoth recorded, and the outcome determined what came next. Strip away the iconography. What remains? The same principle. The quality of your consciousness at death, shaped by the quality of your living, determines your trajectory. Egypt said it. Tibet said it. The mechanism is the same. Mental habit is destiny. And here is what this means for you, right now, today. You are not locked in. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is not a verdict. It is a set of instructions. It is telling you that the grooves can be changed, that attention can be retrained, that the mind which built one set of habits can, with intention, build different ones. Meditation is not relaxation. It is rehearsal. It is the deliberate rewiring of the response patterns that will define your death experience and, if the text is right, your next beginning. The payoff isn't posthumous. The payoff is now. A mind trained to recognize awareness itself, to rest in the open, luminous quality of consciousness without clinging or fleeing, is a mind that moves differently through every experience, through grief, through failure, through the ordinary Tuesday afternoon when nothing makes sense. The training is the practice is the payoff. And yet, there is one more layer. Because knowing the map, knowing the mechanism, knowing the practice, that is still knowledge held at arm's length. What the text is ultimately pointing toward is something you can't think your way into, something that has to be recognized, and that recognition has a name. And once you hear it, everything we've covered clicks into place. Here is where the whole thing lands. You stop being a passenger in your own life the moment you understand that your mind, right now, is already building the navigation tools you will use at death. The mental habits you practice today are not separate from your spiritual destiny. They are your spiritual destiny. The Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't a manual for the dying. It is a mirror for the living. Recognizing the primordial nature of your own mind, that open, luminous awareness underneath every thought, the text says that recognition ends the cycle, not after death. Now, this is the remembering the title of this episode points toward. I want to know which layer landed deepest for you. Was it the near-death science? The karma as momentum? Leave it in the comments. Your insights genuinely add dimensions to this conversation that I can't generate alone. Next episode, we go into the sacred geometry of consciousness itself, the structural patterns underlying everything we've mapped here. That one will change how you see reality, permanently. You were never separate from this knowledge. You were just waiting to remember it. Drop what this unlocked in you into the comments. Your insight completes the map, and if the initiation continues for you, the next episode is already waiting. You are not separate from the light, you are its expression.